Hello and good afternoon, Women Rock Switzerland and the world. I am Michelle Guiliano coming to you live together with Lynn Sorrentino. She is one of the co-authors of Inspired Journeys by Women Rock Switzerland and Swiss Made Story. Inspired Journeys features 31 authors from all over the world and a great diversity of stories. It also features over 70 women's headed businesses who have helped us bring this book together, and it became an Amazon bestseller. And we're so grateful to all of you who have your copy of the paperback or your edition of the ebook. By way of brief introduction, I did want to say that Lynn Sorrentino, she's visited over 50 countries through work and through pleasure. She's passionate about oceans and plastic prevention and pollution prevention. Coastal flooding and marine social science. She holds a master's degree and works at the IUCN and specifically on the UN Plastics Treaty and on plastic pollutions reductions. And Lynn, I'm so grateful to have you here to share with us a little bit about your story, which is titled A Year Without a Moon. And I wanted to just set it up and just say, do you want to introduce your story briefly so that we get a little teaser on what you wrote about and where you've journeyed since? Like, what does this book mean to you, or the contribution of your story? How has it impacted your life to share in this way?
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you to you and Women Rock Switzerland. I can never say this. And also to the Inspired Journeys co-authors. My story, A Year Without a Moon, is really a short version of being diagnosed with breast cancer and recovering from it. My main message throughout the book is really to provide hope to others who may be experiencing something similar, but also to reflect on what you have to be grateful for and how that can help pull you through some really tough times.
You did such a good job writing this story. And I just think the author's note, right? Not everybody in this book is an author or even identifies as an author. They're all best-selling authors today. But I love the brevity. I think that there's so much strength in a short sentence or a simple concept that shows pain and adversity and struggle and overcoming and teaming and getting through, and who you rely on, how you need talismans and opportunities for hope, and the role of the moon and symbols and symbolism and I think you told it really beautifully.
Oh, thank you so much. I think it's quite interesting to go back and read it now, 3.5 years almost later, to see how I might have written it differently. But really the gist of it is that I was writing it in still a bit of a chemo medical sort of fog. And the idea really was to be as honest and as open as I could be about the situation and how it provided me with focusing my efforts on making sure what I could communicate was something that, again, would provide hope, or at least, something to think about for people, especially women that might be going through something similar.
I think that's powerful. In the story, you actually have a segment on gratitude, and you list a bunch of things that provided you stability and safe space and comfort, and that you could feel real gratitude for now. And I just wonder how gratitude is showing up in your life today, 3.5 years later, and cancer-free and standing strong in your role, having some wins.
I think I can say that I'm very grateful for the work that I'm doing now with IUCN. I'm grateful for a really great boss and great team. I am grateful for the English-speaking Cancer Association in Switzerland. I am grateful for all of the Women Rock Switzerland group. I'm grateful for healthcare that works. I'm grateful for having the opportunity to work on something that is super close to my heart and be able to do something that is engaging and challenging and fun. And every day I get up and I think, what else is going to happen today that's going to be, a win. And we just had a really big win yesterday on our team for the high seas treaty that happened. You probably are seeing this in the news.
I sure did.
And it's just, I'm just excited, I think, in general, and I'm grateful to be alive, to be honest with you. I'm just really, really grateful to be here and to be hopefully making at least a little bit of a difference.
Well, certainly. And the High Seas Treaty has been worked on for years by many people in many nations. And to have a win like that, it's important, I think, to see how we can ride the wave a little bit, right? Advocacy work and environmental protection work, it's not so evident. It's not so easy. It has its adversity and its pain points and its struggle. And the communications behind it is can sometimes be really scary necessarily. So when you have a win like this, how can you ride that wave? How can you, how do you do it? How do you fan the flame?
Yeah, and I think riding the wave is a really apt metaphor. I think we are certainly a lot of people on our team do surf or have surfed in the past. And so surfing does give you a level of peacefulness and focus, which is my word for the year this year is focus. And I think getting through all of this, environmental workers in general, whether we're doing advocacy or on the ground work or plastic pollution prevention work, where you're actually dealing with stuff that is quite distressing, it can lead to burnout and it can lead to a lot of eco-anxiety, which we're all feeling, I think, globally. And I think to get through that, it's really to take these little wins and to celebrate them and to celebrate the efforts that are happening. I mean, the plastics pollution treaty that is ongoing now for the next 2 years, hopefully we will have a treaty in the next 2 years, is something to look forward to. And riding the wave of the BBNJ or the High Seas Treaty is certainly something that is going to carry through, I think, our work over the next year for sure, of just being able to say we did this, and it's been, decades in motion. It's a long game, and certainly small wins that happen help you get through the long game, but also being able to take care of yourself, having self-care, and listening to your inner guidance is super, super important, I think, in order to not burn yourself out.
Absolutely. Inner guidance system and our own wayfinder, essential. But I really like that you talk about celebration. I find that this is an area perhaps where UN organizations and the do-gooder part of the world could learn a little bit from sales organizations and corporate multinationals, right? Is that when you have a win, in the classic old days, they would ring a bell, right? And create like a high energy, high vibe around whatever is that win. And I do think that leaders who take time, even using gratitude to thank the people involved and to stretch that out, it creates this desire for more wins, right? It's very overt, but it also hits us at our core and at a real subliminal cellular level. Like we all want the pat on the back, right? We all want to be recognized for our good work. And when something is, long in the making, it's worth to extend, like if you could move the beach back so this wave goes longer. This is what we're talking about, like riding the wave to the limit until the next treaty comes through. I love that you mentioned the word of the year for you is focus. In your story, you talked about bringing back a word of the year from 2017 to support you in 2022, when you had this diagnosis right at the start of COVID. And so I wonder if you could speak to bravery, and is there a journey story for you within, why a word of the year, and what does it give you? What does it bring you? Or what do you experience with these words, brave and bravery and focus?
Sure. So my word of the year practice started with a friend of mine who's also a coach, Marissa Ribordi, and she's part of Women Rock Switzerland. And her aim was every year at the beginning of the year to kind of start the year with a women's circle. And this is something I'd been doing for a few years with her. It kind of course, fell off during the COVID times. But my word of the year in 2017 happened to be brave. That's what I got when I was doing this practice with her. And I recycled it because I felt like that was what resonated most in terms of getting a really scary diagnosis of breast cancer. And I reflected upon it. I had it painted on a little piece of paper, and it was, right next to my bed, so that, every morning or every afternoon when I woke up from my various treatments, I would see it and I would focus on it. And bravery for me now, like then it was really just getting through things. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so bravery for me involved, making sure I was masking, and I'm still masking in a lot of places. Bravery is also being able to say, yes, I can do that, or no, I can't do that. And it's about, again, knowing your internal limits and what is possible, what's not, and what can be, used to, I guess, just sort of move through things now. And especially as we're all navigating this sort of not quite post-COVID world, being brave and being able to focus on things that you can change and things that you can't is super important to me. But also, I think being able to say, again, yes, I can do this, no, I can't, and knowing how to set proper boundaries. Boundaries are super important in terms of your level of bravery and your level of focus. They're all intertwined. And so
and energy management. I think in your
exactly.
story, you talk quite a bit about your own personal energy management and how much patience. Patience was the under theme that I was reading as well, about the patience it requires when you are a go-getter and a seeker and a heal the planet kind of person in your project management and your high performance project management, right? I mean, it's not nothing to work with cross-functional teams and multilingual environments. And so to be able to center in and set clear boundaries is really important. I'm going to come to some of the core questions that provide some stability across these interviews and make, I think, this interview series so powerful. But how do you turn things around for yourself when you're feeling blocked, when your inner voice is turning negative and unloving? What do you do to shift back out of it?
Well, it kind of depends on the situation, but generally, especially when faced with a lot of change that maybe wasn't planned, because one of the things I love about being a project manager is being able to plan and execute and, adapt as needed. But if things aren't planned, sometimes that change can be a little bit disconcerting and knock you off center. So for me, what I do to bring myself back when I'm starting to feel like, ooh, this is going to be hard because, somebody's left the team or because we're having internal changes or whatever, I generally try to think back to what I can control. And, it helps if you have like a nice cookie or a brownie and some coffee, and you can sit there and relax a little and think about what I can do specifically to make things change for the better. Okay, yes, we're faced with X, Y, and Z, and it's making things hard. How do you get around that? What are the options? So recentering for me always comes back to trying to figure out the options, the resources, the timelines, et cetera, et cetera. So things that I have control over that I can then use to adjust for things that I don't have control over. And so it's really about real reflection. And again, it's project management, basically. So.
Do you have tools of the trade? Like when you're coming back to the sphere of influence and you think what's in my control, like how do you process it? Especially, again, I'm imagining your world is highly complex. And though you're in the middle of some nuanced aspects of the project, how do you take that global perspective or that big picture view and then boil down to what is within my sphere of influence and what is within my levers of control? Do you have tools of the trade?
The way I manage our projects that we have internal to our work is using things like, spreadsheets, things I keep tacked to my wall on my desk.
So you have global overviews.
So that I do have an overview of here's the outcomes we're trying to achieve, and here are the outputs we're trying to do in this time frame and with these people. And so it's really about, again, being very familiar with what can and can't be done and by whom and what the timelines are and things like that. So my tools of the trade really include keeping track of everything and trying to do sort of a weekly wrap up internally for myself and my boss and our partners of what we're trying to do, what we've done, what we've achieved, what we're still needing to do, things like that. Real basic project management. But it does help because it really helps to again, keep track of everything. So I don't use a lot of, like, we don't use Slack or anything like that within IUCN, but I do use a lot of our internal tools through Microsoft Teams, et cetera, to keep track of work and projects and things like that. So yeah, it's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork, but it's, it's basic project management. So
yeah, I love that. And I find that, when emotional resonance can come out of that too, right? When you realize where your sphere of influence is, you can calm down. Like you can say, oh, I can't do this. I can't do that.
I can't do that.
Like,
exactly.
So just gaining a healthy perspective on it can give you, some poise when you may need it most, when confronted with this or that. So I think that's great. Thank you for addressing that question. We asked others, how do you identify culturally? What is your cultural identification?
Well, I've lived in Switzerland now for almost 15 years, and I consider myself from Seattle, even though I was born and raised in California. And having lived abroad for like I said, 15 years almost, I think I identify really as an expat. I mean, I don't identify much as an American per se. I don't identify as like an Italian American like I used to maybe when I was in Seattle, because my father's side of the family was from Sicily. I think culturally, I guess I just identify as an expat, really. And I know that's not a culture, but
it has its nomadic influences. It has its flavors of language. It has its, job security situation and healthcare fluidness. Like, it has some common points, no matter from where you hail, so to speak. Cool. Well, thank you. I wanted to ask, you've already kind of highlighted a little bit about what you're working on right now, which is the plastics treaty. And I guess, so maybe I would ask you more regarding, like, are you doing additional writing? What are you working on perhaps in other aspects of your life as you're thinking about this year? And this year, maybe we bring back the word of focus as well. How are you directing your focus?
Well, I'm directing my focus really to the 5 countries that we're working on. With the World Commission on Environmental Law, which is an IUCN group of volunteers. And the 5 countries are in West Africa. So my focus this year for work is Sierra Leone, Senegal, São Tomé and Príncipe, Cabo Verde, and Guinea-Bissau. And in terms of things outside of work, there's not much happening right now because we are really pressed for time. The plastics treaty work and the capacity building that we're doing over the next 18, 19 months is really going to take the majority of my time. We have to really aim to build the capacity of various negotiators and then also work on the plastics hotspotting aspects of where the plastic pollution is in these countries and also how this relates to the bigger picture. So I do hope that with this interview and with some of the discussions I've had with people I've shared the book with, that I do hope to kind of push this a little bit more throughout the year on Facebook, on LinkedIn, things like that, to kind of bring more awareness to the book and to all the challenges that everybody that is in the book has mentioned that they've been able to overcome. So yeah, really my life the next 2 years is really very, very focused. So.
I think it's very cool that you get to work on plastic reduction when the link between plastic and cancer is so clear. There's no one of us at this life stage who doesn't know someone suffering. You mentioned in our pre-interview that you've been able to pass on the book, and I know that I've been able to sign my copies and editions over to various people, and I continue to get some more as I think about the people that I'm really grateful for and that I can't wait to share this book with. And I really experienced that there's a circle, in fact, in the book that every story sort of holds up the other through the diversity of stories and the diversity of personalities that we've managed to get and capture. And I wonder if you want to share a little bit about sharing the book and what that has felt like or meant to you.
Yeah, I would say I can give you one example. Well, I can give you two examples. One example recently is that I was able to share all 20 copies that I got, the author's copies. And so I'm already starting to share electronic copies and hard copies with others through Amazon. But one of the women that I sent it to is going through her own cancer journey currently.
I'm sorry.
And she's, thank you, she's been a power for good her entire life. And she did write to me yesterday and said, because of the High Seas Treaty work that she's been working on for a number of years, she wrote to me yesterday and said, thank you for the congratulations note, because I was so excited that we finally have a High Seas treaty now that's going to be implemented. And she said, thank you for sending the Inspired Journeys book. It has really helped me, in terms of looking at your journey and how much hope it gave me. And as I said, her journey is different than mine because it's different cancer and she's at a different stage in her life. But it was something that was really touching to me to realize that she can actually use this and read some of the other stories, and hopefully it'll distract her from some of the, chaos that she may be experiencing now, but also help her to see that there is, some hope. And a second example I can give you is that I sent it to a friend of mine who lives in the States, and her first reaction after she read through the whole book was, wow, this is really great to read all these stories, but oh my God, women are so resilient, but also they are very, in some cases, so oppressed, and they have to overcome so much. And she realized how privileged she'd been in her life and how her perspective was just so very American. And so it was really good to kind of get that feedback too of, just being able to read it and be inspired. I mean, that's the whole point of the title and the whole book in general. It's about showing that inspiration of, here are the challenges I've faced and here's how I overcame them. And, giving people tools to look at their own journey and say, oh, I never thought of that. Maybe I can use that tool and overcome whatever it might be that is, the biggest challenge in your life right now.
And I also hope, thank you for sharing all of that. I also hope to value their own journey and to share their own stories, right? I also think that there's such an underappreciation for the heroism that is women's stories, right? Whether that is in literature or in our business circles and conversations or in our private lives. It is not often that women are allowed to or given space to share their heroic adventures and honored for that. Their perspective so often silenced or squelched for some other form of adventure story. And so I'm really glad that you said that. When we were speaking earlier and you had talked about raising questions. And I also see that, right, that whether or not people wrote with an instructional mindset or not, when people read these stories, we can't help but look at our own lives in a different, through a different lens or through a different way, and to ask some questions. What is abuse for me? What is health to me? What about gratitude? What about, how do I center? Where is my team? Who would show up for me in the middle of the night or help me, get across a border if I was under threat? And so I think there's so many questions that get born from this and that help end isolation of women, period. And so I'm grateful for your sharing. I want to ask, when you think about your own legacy, and this is a little bit about what we were just talking about, right? Women are not taught often to think about their own legacy. And even, quote, the greats, right? Maya Angelou and Oprah have a famous conversation that Oprah recounted about Maya Angelou, her mentor. Oprah used to recount and say, that Maya said, you have no idea. You have no idea about your legacy. And I agree in a very Hamilton-esque way. We have no idea about our legacy until we're dead and gone. Somebody else writes it. It's the way you made others feel, and it's what you leave behind. But when we do imagine to take our life as seriously as to have left a legacy, or if you could design your own legacy with a main message for the world, what do you think your message might be?
So I thought about this a lot over the weekend when I was reviewing some of the
Thank you. That's really honoring.
And I think really it's that kindness matters. and supporting each other matters. And I think this is something I've seen throughout my career, but also in my personal life and reading through some of these stories, that being available when you can be available and being kind to each other is super, super important. I think like the saying goes, you never know what anybody else is experiencing, and the whole walking in their mile in their shoes kind of thing is really also, I think, something that we need to reflect upon, especially as we live in such a complex world. I mean, as we were discussing earlier too, the levels of eco-anxiety, the global pandemic situation, the war in Ukraine, all of these things are creating quite a lot of stress for people. And so if you can be kind to others and also, be there, I think that's really the most important legacy you can be. Is that, the usual phrase of nobody says on their deathbed, I wish I would have worked more. And I think that's really true. I want to be able, that if I'm ever soon, well, far in the future, but I guess
far in the future,
far away, on my deathbed, that I made an impact on someone's life for the positive. I think that's really it. I mean, my mentor that I had here in Switzerland for a number of years passed in 2019, about a month before I got my diagnosis, and I do mention her in the book as well. She passed from recurrent metastatic breast cancer, and she left an incredible legacy. I mean, one that I'm sure I will never live up to, but she really is celebrated every year still. And she helped so many young women in mostly the Pacific and Asia really, I think, find their voice. And I hope that, with the small amount of work I'm doing, that I can make some sort of a similar impact.
I love that. That's powerful. That's great. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time, Lynn. I really appreciate it. And I'm really glad to hear you've shared all of your copies. Those who don't have a copy of the book, go get it. And do join us in these interviews as we go through the series. We hope to meet all 31 chapter authors as we have the privilege and the opportunity to do so while we have breath and beingness and presence, and while we prioritize teaming and elevating the voices of women who remain underrepresented in the world of literature, underread, under-endorsed, under-elevated. So if you have a copy, go give a 5-star rating and do share with your friends. Lynn, thank you so much for being with us. Good luck with the plastic treaty and with all of your good, important work, and rock on. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and thanks to the Women Rock Switzerland group as well.
With pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.